She waved a police officer every day until one day she just disappeared. What he found inside that house was shocking and would change his lives forever. A 9-year-old girl, abandoned, struggling to survive. But a simple gesture has changed her destiny unbelievably. What happened to her? And why did this policeman fall in tears 20 years later? The real story that will thrill you. Watch now. In the heart of the city of Kansas, a girl named Clyn Scales, just 9 years old, developed an unusual habit. Every day without fault, she was positioned in front of a large window of her house, eagerly waiting for the moment a police car would pass the street. As soon as the car appeared in the distance, Clyn was excited and waved excitedly to the officer inside the vehicle. Policeman Jeffrey Colvin, who was conducting regular patrols in that region, realized the gesture and, driven by a goodness of kindness, began to return the girl's wave. This little ritual soon became a routine for both. For Clyn, it was more than a simple greeting, a moment of comfort amid the difficult reality in which I lived. For Jeffrey, a man used to dealing with the challenges of crime in the city, that innocent smile made his work a little lighter. However, what seemed like a common gesture would soon become a powerful link, able to forever change the fate of that child. One morning, something unexpected happened. Clyn wasn't in the window. The policeman immediately felt that something was wrong. All the time she patrolled the region, she had never failed to appear. What could have happened? Concern grew inside Jeffrey, leading him to make a decision that, without him knowing, would eventually save a life. From a very young age, Clyn Scales has known the harsh reality of life. Created in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods of Kansas, she and her younger brothers have grown in an extremely vulnerable environment. His mother, a victim of drug addiction, often disappeared for days or even weeks, leaving children alone and without any kind of protection. Without an adult responsible around, Clyn was forced to assume a role that no child should play, that of mother and protector of his brothers. When the mother departed, often without even leaving a piece of bread backwards, the girl became the only source of safety and support for the little ones. Given the need, she began to steal small portions of food in nearby stores. It was not out of evil or disobedience, but for despair. For Clyn, it was not about breaking rules, but to ensure that their brothers had something to eat at least once a day. The family situation did not go unnoticed by the city's social service, which had already identified children as part of a risk group. However, even with the records of negligence, no concrete action has been taken to ensure their well-being. Thus, day after day, Clyn faced the hard battle alone, relying only on his own strength and determination. It was in this scenario of abandonment that the unexpected bond between Clyn and policeman Jeffrey Colvin emerged. Although he could not act directly against mother's negligence or system inefficiency, he began to pay attention to the girl and realized that there was something different in her story. Unknowingly, he would become the first reliable figure in the girl's life, someone she could look with admiration and perhaps find a hope of change. Officer Jeffrey Colvin was a police department veteran accustomed to patrolling the most dangerous areas of Kansas. For years, he has witnessed countless stories of crime, abuse, and abandonment, but few situations impacted him as much as little Clyn Scales. It all started simply. Passing daily the street where Clyn lived, he noticed that a little girl always watched him out the window. In the beginning, the interaction between the two boiled down to a brief nod. However, over time, this little gesture has become a true ritual. Each morning, Clyn eagerly waited for the police car and, seeing her approaching, waved excitedly. Jeffrey, in turn, always responded with a smile. Although it was a seemingly simple gesture, this silent exchange of greetings meant a lot to the girl. For her, the policeman represented safety, stability, and kindness, elements that were completely missing in her home life. Over time, the relationship between the two evolved. Jeffrey began to stop in front of Clyn's house to talk to her. The officer realized that there was something wrong in the way the girl lived. His countenance always carried a tired expression, and his clothes were often dirty and spent. The family situation was known for social services, but for the police frustration, nothing had been done to change the scenario. Even without having the power to remove children from that reality, Jeffrey decided to do whatever was within her reach. He went on to visit them regularly, taking small pleasures, such as sweets, and showing genuine concern for the well-being of Clint and his brothers. This apparently simple attitude made the girl begin to see someone in whom she could trust. Once, during one of these visits, Jeffrey had a special conversation with Clint. He assured that if she ever needed help, he would be there to protect her. To seal his promise, he made a symbolic gesture, a little girl's promise, ensuring that she would not abandon her. The girl, touched by the policeman's attitude, revealed that she had a dream. One day she wanted to become a police officer, just like him. The bond between the two became stronger and stronger. However, neither could predict that Jeffrey soon would have to fulfill his promise and save Clint's life in a much more urgent and dramatic way. That morning, everything seemed to follow the usual course. Policeman Jeffrey Colvin drove down the same street as usual, waiting to see Clint's scales appear in the window to wave, as he did every day. However, this time, something was different. The girl did not appear. Jeffrey knew Clint never failed to give her morning fulfillment. The girl's silence and absence caused her a sense of restlessness that he could not ignore. As an experienced police officer, he understood that in neighborhoods like that, any sudden change could mean problems. Moved by concern, he parked the car and headed to the door of the house. It touched the bell, but no one answered. He tried to hit a few times and even called the girl's name, but the silence inside the house was absolute. Something was wrong. Faced with the lack of answer, Jeffrey made a drastic decision. He broke into the door and entered the residence. As soon as he crossed the entrance, he was hit by a devastating scene. Clint was lying on the living room floor with no strength to move, pale and with a weak breathing. Beside her, her two smaller brothers were shrunk in a corner, crying and terrified. The policeman ran to the girl, trying to understand what was going on. Clint tried to speak, but only whispered a few words. "I can't breathe." His condition was critical. Jeffrey's instinct took control and, without wasting time, he took the girl in his arms, took his brothers to the car, and drove at high speed to the nearest hospital. At the hospital, the doctors were clear. If Clint had been a few more hours in that situation, he would probably not have survived. The diagnosis was severe: extreme malnutrition and widespread weakness. Her body no longer had enough energy to keep working, and she was on the verge of a total collapse. Thanks to Jeffrey's quick action, Clint's life was saved. However, this hospitalization would mark the end of a phase of his life and the beginning of another completely different. She would never go back to her mother's house. The girl's fate was about to change forever. After days of hospitalization and treatment at the hospital, Clint's scales finally began to recover. His fragile body, punished by malnutrition, was gaining strength again. However, something had definitely changed. She and her brothers would no longer go back to the house where they grew up. And the authorities made the decision to remove them from the custody of the mother, who, due to drug addiction and prolonged negligence, could not take care of the children. Thus, Clint and his brothers were sent to a new adopted home in Galveston County, Texas, more than 200 kilometers away from his ancient city. The transition was not easy. Separated from the only home she knew and unable to say goodbye to Jeffrey, the girl felt a great emptiness. Despite the difficulties he had faced, his childhood was marked by a single positive constant: the policeman who has always been there for her. Now, without her presence, she saw herself in a new and unknown world. On the other hand, the change also brought hope. For the first time, Clint and his brothers were in a safe environment, with adults who worried about their well-being. They underwent medical follow-up, received proper food, and were able to attend the school regularly. Meanwhile, in Kansas, policeman Jeffrey Colvin remained his patrol routine. However, he never forgot the little girl from the window. For years, he wondered what would have happened to her. Was she okay? Had he got a better life? Time has passed and life went to both. What Jeffrey didn't know was that many years later, fate still reserved an unexpected and exciting reunion. The years passed, and little by little, Clint Scales built a new life in Texas. Far from extreme poverty and the abandonment of her childhood, she could finally grow in a safer and healthier environment. However, a memory never left it: policeman Jeffrey Colvin. That man, who had been his only source of support and affection so long, was still alive in his mind. It was he who saved his life, both physical and emotional. Inspired by him, Clint decided to follow a path that many would find unlikely to a girl who grew up surrounded by crime and negligence. She wanted to become a police officer. With determination, she joined the police academy and spent years preparing. Her goal was simple but powerful: to be for others what Jeffrey had been to her. Then, in 2018, almost 20 years after the last meeting between the two, Jeffrey received an unexpected invitation. He was called to attend the graduation ceremony of a new class of police officers in Galveston County, Texas. The invitation caught him by surprise. He didn't know anyone in that city. Curious, he examined the message more carefully, and as he read the name of who sent it, his hands shaked. Clyn Scales. At that moment, all the memories came back. The girl from the window, the fragile and smiling child who waved to him every day. The girl he found lying on the floor of his house, fighting for life. She was alive, and more than that, it was becoming a police officer. Without hesitation, Jeffrey accepted the invitation and attended the graduation. When he arrived at the ceremony, his heart shot. Before him was Clyn, now an adult woman, wearing the uniform she had dreamed so much. The most exciting moment came when he was called to give her the police badge. It was a symbolic gesture, but with immense weight. The little girl he rescued now was ready to rescue other people. During his graduation speech, Clyn made a point of mentioning Jeffrey's importance in his career. She stated that each person who comes into our lives has a purpose, and that Jeffrey's purpose was to teach her about examples and dreams. With tears in his eyes, the policeman realized that his simple gesture of kindness, "I nod to a lonely girl," there is a fate changed. The story of Clyn Scales and Jeffrey Colvin is proof of the impact that a simple gesture can have on someone's life. Which began as a daily wave between a girl and a policeman, turned into a bond that surpassed the time and difficulties of life. Clyn grew up facing extreme challenges: blackness, hunger, and abandonment. But in the midst of this dark scenario, she found hope in the kindness of a single person. Jeffrey not only saved her life physically when she rescued her from her home, but also gave her a model of humanity and compassion, something that inspired her to follow a completely different path from the fate that seemed out of her. His dream of becoming a police officer did not come by chance. For Clyn, dressing that uniform meant much more than a job. It was a way to continue the legacy of the man who once reached out to him when no one else did. The reunion between the two decades later was not only exciting, but also symbolic. Jeffrey saw before him no more helpless little girl, but a strong woman, determined and ready to protect others, just as he did for her. This story reinforces a powerful teaching. Never underestimate the impact of an act of kindness. What may seem small to those who give can be transformative to those who receive. And you, do you know any similar history? Leave your comment and share your opinion. Thank you for following this amazing story. We see each other in the next video.